Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Holla at your boy. It's Dr. Will, and welcome to another Dr. Will show. As you hear from my voice, I'm starting to get something, and it's right before spring. Like spring break starts like Monday, so I hope I'm well and get to enjoy my break. But here we are today. We're going to be talking about coding, folks. Coding in the classrooms, real big, it's real big. We're here with Katie Williams, who's and this is the power of social. uh, she's on another continent from me right now, so we're trying to do big things over here at the Dr. Will Show. So, Katie, hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm coming in straight from Amsterdam. It's afternoon for me. I guess it's morning for you. But it's just great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for agreeing to be a guest. So, for those people who are watching the show, and some people may even barely know who I am, but why don't you sort of tell the folks a little bit about yourself?
Great. Yeah, so I'm a digital design teacher at the International School of Amsterdam, but I'm not Dutch. I'm American, as you can probably tell by my accent. Born and raised in Tennessee. And I'm also a very proud Teach for America alumni. And in Amsterdam, I do currently work as a teacher at the International School, and then I also run a couple initiatives. One is called Rise of Code, where I run workshops in Dutch public schools teaching coding. And then I also run one which is called Coding and Cocktails, which is obviously not for children. And that's a workshop for adults, and it's a really easy way to get introduced to coding as well.
Awesome, awesome. So, for viewers of this podcast, let's begin with defining coding. So, what is coding?
Yeah, I think that a lot of computer programmers would probably be against the term coding. So technically it's computer programming, but coding is kind of a popularized term for computer programming. I think, I'm not really sure when that came about. I think I can remember watching that Mark Zuckerberg movie, The Social Network, and then kind of the idealization of Steve Jobs and that idea of like making it big as a hacker. I think that term coding kind of came to the forefront. And also, code.org, which is an amazing organization, has done so much PR for coding, for learning to code. I think the term got popularized. And also, big props to code.org for all the work they've done in really enhancing the public image of coding and like who can be a computer programmer. Because before that, I think a lot of us had the idea that computer programming was like a field for really nerdy guys, and now that's really been broadened, especially by code.org. So big props to them for that PR campaign. It was beautiful.
Excellent. So,
And then also, I think I skipped your question. What is computer programming?
yeah.
So computer programming is really telling a computer what to do. Like computers are really great at following instructions. So they follow the instructions that we tell them to do. But they can't really think for themselves yet. So I guess we're not quite at the point of like rise of the machines. So we have to tell computers what to think and what to do, which is what computer programming is. It's what powers your operating system, like OS X, powers your favorite software, like Photoshop, and even apps like Google Plus or Twitter, websites that you view in your browser itself. So what I think is really cool is to think of computer programming as it's something that humans do. Like people make all this stuff. And I used to be a history teacher as well, so I like to think a lot about humans made all this, right? Like humans made this city and this society. But in terms of technology, I think it's even more empowering to know that like tech really comes from people. So yeah, I think that's really empowering.
Cool, cool. Never thought of it uh, that way. When you saw the other stuff, I was like, Terminator, Terminator. Over the past 7 years, there have been a lot of flux in the job market. People have lost their jobs. Newer technologies have made some jobs obsolete. Even companies like Netflix have used technology um, to disrupt industries. I mean, who has a blockbuster car nowadays? So with a lot of that has come coverage with coding and programming and how people should have this skill set for the future. So, in thinking of that, what drew you to coding and who inspired you?
Gosh, I'm just thinking what happened to Blockbuster. Is Blockbuster gone now? They're gone, aren't they?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Yeah, so I went to school for public relations actually. I never really thought about computer programming as a career field for me. That's probably just a sign of the times. I mean, 20 years ago when I was in school, you didn't often hear, like girls, I don't think girls often heard, like, you should be a computer programmer. So I went into communications. But then I was working for DonorsChoose.org. I don't know if our viewers have heard of Donors Choose. Maybe I'll just plug them right now. If you need school supplies, go to DonorsChoose.org. It's like a Kickstarter for teachers. Yeah, so I was working for DonorsChoose.org doing communications, doing outreach, and when I first started the job, I realized that I had to do queries on the database. So this was an eye-opener to me. Like, I'd never done queries on databases using SQL. But I worked on a really cool, diverse team of all women, actually, at the time, in our West office, and they were all really proficient in SQL and other computer programming languages, so I really looked up to my team. It was really empowering for me, like, whoa, girls can do computer programming? This is amazing. So yeah, I just started learning, and the cool thing is, I should also mention, none of my mentors or people on my team, they didn't really tell me how to do it. They weren't like, this is how you do it. I kind of had to tinker around, like look things up on the web and fail a lot and keep trying. I think that's a big lesson for anybody that wants to start with any computer programming language. Yeah, you can't really expect somebody to tell you how to do it. You kind of have to figure it out on your own and ask questions to mentors along the way, but not expect it to be like, this is how you do it. You kind of have to figure it out for yourself. And nowadays, there are so many tutorials online and programs that can help teach you, and Q&A on the internet that you really can teach yourself, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm. So now I don't want to put you on the spot, all right? But I can't do this without asking you about diversity or the lack thereof in technology. What are your thoughts on the lack of diversity in ed tech, and what can be done to influence more girls and more students of color to get into coding?
Actually, thank you for putting me on the spot. Yeah, I think when I was working for DonorsChoose.org on my West team, I was working in a pretty diverse environment, so I was really lucky. And then later, I moved to some different organizations and startups that were, I guess I could say, less diverse, and it was really eye-opening to me, like what kind of company cultures can be created in technology or in startups when there's a lack of diversity. So I can say from experience that diversity only enhances the productivity of a team. It only enhances outcomes. It just makes for a better team, a better company, a better world. So I'm really glad that you asked me about it. Yeah, I think for me, I've worked in education and startups, so I've seen kind of both sides of the coin. Like, I've seen the pipeline of students, and then I've also seen like what startups look like right now. And I think that a lot of startups, especially in the tech sector, they have a predominantly white dude bro culture, and it's really unfortunate that the pipeline thus far has kind of created this culture. So I think it's really important for companies and startups to be really inclusive and to promote diversity and to seek out diverse applicants and to make a company culture that is inclusive and supportive for everyone. Nobody wants a company culture where you feel excluded in any way. So yeah, I think that for startups, that's important. In education as well, it's just great to work on diverse teams. So for me, I love working on diverse teams. I want to promote diversity and make sure that that's something that's being championed at any organization or school that I work at. But it's tough. It's tough being a female in technology. I'm sure it's even more difficult being a female of color in technology, or a trans female of color in technology. I mean, the list goes on. Yeah, and I'm gonna also reference. Let's see, can I share some slides actually here?
Yep.
Or can I just reference my slide share?
You can share it.
We'll just screen share?
Yep. Move your cursor to the left of the screen, and you're going to see a green sort of monitor with an arrow.
Awesome. I got it. Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, so I made some slides about diversity and technology just because I think it's so important. Let's see, I'm going to do my desktop here. Start a screen share. Is that going to do it? We got it?
Yep, we got it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think that as teachers, we have to really ensure that all of our students believe that computer science is a field for them. So as teachers, it's so cool that we can be there for our students and be like, you can do it. Oh, you're perfect for this. Like, you are so great at math, or you're so great, you're doing so well in this subject. Have you ever thought about computer programming? Or I noticed that you love to be on your mobile device. Like, have you ever thought about computer programming? I think one of the most important roles we have as educators is motivating our students to believe in themselves and to know that they can do it. And startups, on the other hand, focus on big data. It's a big buzzword in startups. So I wanted to focus on some data that I found online about diversity in the computer science field and in the tech sector. So here's just a graph from code.org that shows the jobs that are available versus the students that are studying computer science. So there's this huge opportunity for jobs, for the jobs of today and for the jobs of tomorrow. So for me as an educator, I see, wow, I want all of my students to get excellent jobs and to make good money and to do well and prosper. So computer science is a great field where they could do that. But if you look at the statistics right now, the tech field is really not equal for women, for people of color. So I think that first we just have to accept that it's not equal and use this data to kind of drive our teaching practices. Like, we know it's not equal, we have to do something about it. So here's another infographic from code.org showing the women that graduate with computer science degrees. So it's obvious here in this image that quite less than 50% of women graduate with computer science degrees. And then here's another graph about the diversity problem in Silicon Valley. So we're looking at big companies like Google and Microsoft and Twitter and Facebook that are all more than 50% white, which is disappointing. Especially most of these companies are based in California. So I started looking up some demographics about California, because California is a really diverse state. So California is 60% people of color, yet Google, which is headquartered in California, is only 2% black and 3% Hispanic, which is very shocking. And the United States is 50% female, but only 20% of software engineers are female. And unfortunately, I couldn't find any data on women of color or trans women of color or the LGBT community in software. So I would love to find that data as well. If anybody has it, please reach out to me. So we should all feel pretty stressed out about it. Like, why is this happening? What can we do? And I think that first we just have to accept that there is a system that exists that benefits white people and white men, especially in the tech sector, and we as educators can really do something about it. Like, we actually can do something. We are poised at this spot where we have these wonderful, beautiful children who are just open to learning, and we're there to support them and help them. So I think as teachers we have to ensure that our students feel confident to pursue fields in tech because there's so much money in tech in the future. Like, let's make sure that all of our kids, especially our students of color and girls, right, that they're able to get these jobs so that we can reverse the trends that we're seeing now, and then maybe in 10 years we could look at these numbers again and see an entirely different picture. That would be my hope, that we see an entirely different picture in software engineering and in tech companies and in startups. We just see a much more equal playing field. So that's what I hope for. Yeah, I hope that answers that question. So I'm going to try to come back to me here. Here I am.
There you go. So that was eye-opening for a lot of reasons. And looking at that, where do you see coding's place in the K-12 landscape? And how does programs like Scratch and Code.org teach students to become coders?
the sun's going down here. It's getting kind of shadowy. I'm going to try to move around a little bit. Let's see. There we go. That's a little better. There are a lot of countries out there, like the UK, for example, has actually added computer programming to their K-12 curriculum, which is amazing. Estonia actually is another country, a small European country, that teaches coding starting from first grade. Now, the United States doesn't have it in the curriculum yet, but I'm hoping we're going to get there, and I think with organizations like code.org, we will get there. We have the hour of code. I think it's just going to be a snowball effect. It's just going to keep, like, coding is just going to keep penetrating our curriculum until it actually is in the curriculum. But until then, I think it's really up to teachers to kind of include some computer programming in what they're teaching. So for example, I teach digital design, but I worked with our humanities, which is kind of a social studies teacher, to do some computer programming with his classes. So I had 6th grade students using Scratch to build geography games. So it's really cool. They're learning about geography. They're doing like latitude and longitude and different countries, but they're showing their project-based learning in a game that they created using computer programming on Scratch. So I think that teachers in any subject area can embed computer programming in what they're teaching. And the cool thing, and I really want to mention it, you don't have to know how to computer program to teach computer programming. I think that's like the biggest takeaway. You don't have to, because these applications like Scratch exist that are just amazing. Like, I actually, when I was teaching this unit with my kids, I did not show them how to do it. I actually purposefully did not show them how to do it. I started out the unit with a video. It's a TED Talk by Dr. Sugata Mitra, and it's called School in the Cloud, where he puts a computer in a wall of a slum in rural India and just leaves it there and kind of observes. And the kids in that slum community end up teaching themselves to use the computer, to use the web browser, and the whole thing's in English. So they even had to teach themselves English to learn how to use this machine. So it's a great TED Talk in self-directed learning. So I showed my kids this TED Talk about self-directed learning. Like, you know, and I work at an international school, which is very privileged, so I tell them, you know, these kids in a slum community were able, in a very impoverished community, were able to teach themselves English to use a computer. So if they can do that, you can definitely use the Scratch Help Center, use the Scratch flashcards that I've printed off for you, watch the YouTube tutorials to teach yourself how to use Scratch. So I didn't teach them at all, and by the end of the unit they had taught themselves how to use Scratch, and they produced their own geography games. So, and that was 6th grade, and I truly believe it's possible for any age group. They can teach themselves with everything that's out there. Scratch is a great platform. Yeah, so for teachers, I think sometimes teachers feel scared or hesitant, or, you know, I don't want to be vulnerable with my kids and let them know that I don't know how to do this thing. But I think it's fine. It's okay. The kids are fine on their own. Just giving them the opportunity and the space to do it, and encouraging them and telling them, like, wow, how did you do that? You did such a great job. I'm so proud of you. I think that can go a really long way.
Mm-hmm. So, for those, and you're doing things in your classroom, and there's a lot of things going out there. But what would you say that students actually get out of learning how to computer program, and what are the educational outcomes, if any, for students who learn how to program computers?
I think for computer programming, I mean, obviously logic is a big one. Logic, learning a different language, because different computer programming languages are essentially languages. But also creativity, and I think that we don't often associate creativity with coding, but there are different ways to do the same thing. So kids really do have to be creative and think outside the box and kind of think, like, how could I do this particular thing? How could I make it work? Troubleshooting. Oftentimes it just doesn't work, so they have to do it again. Debug their code. And then collaboration. And I think that there is that stereotype that computer programmers maybe just like work on the computer by themselves all the time. And it's really not the case. They collaborate quite a bit. So students can collaborate with one another on their code, and especially with Scratch. I just keep coming back to Scratch. The cool thing about Scratch is that you can see inside the code of all the projects from kids all over the world on their site. So you can basically flip the project around. So on one side you see the game, you can flip it and see the code, and then you can remix that. So kids are being super collaborative. They can improve other kids' games. They can change other kids' games. So I think creativity and collaboration are huge components of computer programming that maybe we don't hear as much about. Like obviously the math skills and the technical skills are all there too, the logic skills. But creativity and collaboration are huge as well.
Okay, so for that teacher who's watching this show, and he or she is like, Katie, you set me on fire. You set me on fire. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. And I want to bring coding to my classroom. How do they do that? And what help is out there for them? What programs do you recommend for those teachers to look into?
I think it depends on the subject level and the grade level, first of all. And it depends on what kind of technology you have available in your school. So I think it's going to differ from teacher to teacher. Like I work at a one-to-one laptop school in middle school, and then in lower school there's a one-to-one iPad program. So that makes it really easy. If you're going with your kids maybe to a computer lab or renting carts, you got to keep all that in consideration as well. Scratch is fantastic. I've seen kids in elementary school use Scratch, up to high school using Scratch. You can do a lot with it. But there's tons of apps. Code Academy is huge. I started learning HTML and CSS on Code Academy when I was 26. So I think there's hope for all of us. But I've also had high school kids using Code Academy. So that's a great one. Code Academy is a little more serious. Like if you really want to learn a language. Scratch, you're using blocks to put things together. So it's more of like the concept of computer programming. And there are tons of apps as well. In fact, in the SlideShare, I have a link to a page that I created. It's a link directory of just tons of resources, and they're prioritized actually. So if you're on number one, that will be my favorites. So maybe I can share that as well. And it's in the SlideShare that we're going to attach as well. But yeah, I have a ton of links there. And if maybe teachers out there see that something's missing, just let me know and I'll add it on there too. Let's see, I'm gonna share my screen again. Let's see. Are we there?
Yep.
Oh, great. Yeah, so I have a list of resources that it's kind of a long URL. learncomputerprogramming.zeef.com. I have tons of links. So I hope that people will go over there and kind of get inspired. And then if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me on Twitter. And then maybe for teachers that are kind of apprehensive to try learning to code, maybe they want to do it with a co-teacher. Like I did a coding unit with the social studies teacher. So maybe you want to do a unit together with another teacher so you can support each other on it. But yeah, I think the best thing is just not to be afraid and just go for it. Just say like, this unit, we're using Scratch. The kids are already so tech literate that I think all of your fears will just float away once you see the kids on the computers working very well. And Scratch as well, they have some flashcards that you can print out. So I printed them out and laminated them, and I gave them to each set of kids, and it was just great. Scratch has everything. I keep promoting Scratch. I am not affiliated with Scratch, but I do love Scratch, and I do have tons of other apps, especially if you're a school with iPads. There are tons of apps you could use as well. So that's all on that page. Y'all can check it out later, and I'll come back. Here I am.
Okay, so before we go, what are your final thoughts? What do you want viewers to take away from this interview?
Gosh, well, yeah, I think there's kind of two components, right? Because from one component, I've worked in startups before. I've worked in startups in San Francisco and Amsterdam. I'm also a teacher, so I've kind of worked in two different sectors in my life. And I think just the big takeaway from me is that it's discouraging for me to go to a startup and see that it's all young white males. I think that's so discouraging. And we have to change that. Like, we really have to change that as educators. how amazing that we have this role where we can change that. I mean, I feel really empowered as a teacher that I can help to change the tide of what the future is going to look like. Like, I really want to see just a totally different demographic of computer programmers in the future, because I think everyone deserves to be able to create amazing stuff. So yeah, just empowering your kids to know that computer programming is about creating awesome stuff. If you have an app idea or an idea like, oh, what if we did this, or what if we could do this? Knowing how to computer program gives you the power to be able to bring your ideas to life. So we as educators have to, number one, know the facts about the problems in the tech sector, because those problems exist. Google has come out and said, you know, we are not proud of where we are in terms of diversity on our teams. So we know that that's the truth. Like, data doesn't lie. So we as educators have to use that data to empower our students. We know what the landscape looks like in tech, and we want to change that landscape. So we have to motivate our students, empower them. If you see kids using their mobile phones, I mean, I think that's an opportunity not to take the phone away, but to say, like, oh, I notice you really have an interest in technology. Have you ever thought about computer programming? Have you ever thought about, you know, learning to computer program online? I have some links I could show you, right? So let's not tear kids down. Let's uplift them and empower them, and hopefully they'll be creating amazing apps for us to use in the future, and we can say, that was my student. They have the next Airbnb. That's amazing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It was a pleasure to hang out with you today, Katie. Appreciate how refreshing you are, and thank you for being a guest, and hope to have you back again soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And so for those of you who are watching this show, as always, this will be on my blog. You can connect with Katie on Twitter and such. And I'll be on the lookout. I'm starting a series on diversity and ed tech, so be on the lookout for that, folks. And don't forget to see my next show on personalized learning with Kate Prince. That's it for the Dr. Will Show. See y'all next time.